first witness is Lieutenant Colonel Jason Amarine. Lieutenant Colonel Amarine serves in the United States Army and led a Special Forces team in Afghanistan in 2001, for which he received a Purple Heart and Bronze Star with V device, which denotes participation in acts of heroism involving conflict with an armed enemy. Lieutenant Colonel Amarine has raised concerns about hostage recovery efforts to Congress. Lieutenant Colonel Amarine.
Thank you, sir. Warren Weinstein is dead. Colin Rutherford, Josh Boyle, Caitlin Coleman, and the child she bore in captivity remain hostages in Pakistan. I used every resource available, but I failed them. One of those resources was my constitutional right to speak to members of Congress. You passed the Military Whistleblower Protection Act to ensure such access. But after I made protected disclosures to Congress, the Army suspended my clearance, removed me from my job, and sought to court-martial me. As a soldier, I support and defend the Constitution of the United States in order to have a government in which the voices of the people are heard. My team had a difficult mission, and I used all legal means available to recover the hostages. You, the Congress, were my last resort. But now I'm labeled a whistleblower, a term that's both radioactive and derogatory. I'm before you because I did my duty, and you need to ensure all in uniform could go on doing their duty without fear of reprisal. Let me be clear. I never blame my situation on the White House. My loyalty is to my Commander-in-Chief as I support and defend the Constitution. Whatever I say today is not as a Republican or a Democrat, but as a soldier without allegiance to any political parties. In early 2013, my office was asked to help get Sergeant Bergdahl home. We audited the recovery effort and determined that the reason the effort failed for 4 years was because our nation lacked an organization that can synchronize the efforts of all our government agencies to get our hostages home. We also realized that there were civilian hostages in Pakistan that nobody was trying to free, so we added them to our mission. I assessed that both issues were caused by an evolutionary misstep that created stovepipes of our federal agencies. The Department of Defense faced this problem in the 80s as Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines operated independently of one another, leading to the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986. Transformation on that scale literally takes an act of Congress. To get the hostages home, my team worked 3 lines of effort: fix the coordination of the recovery, develop a viable trade, and get the Taliban back to the negotiating table. My team was equipped to address the latter 2 of those tasks, but fixing the government's interagency process was obviously beyond our capability. Recovering Sergeant Bergdahl was a critical step to carrying out our Commander-in-Chief's objective of ending the longest war in American history. So I went to Congress in order to repair a dysfunctional bureaucracy to support our president. It caused the Army to place me under criminal investigation. I spoke to Representative Duncan Hunter because he's a member of the House Armed Services Committee. I needed him to buttress our efforts with 2 simple messages. The hostage recovery effort was broken, and because of that, 5 hostages and a prisoner of war had little hope of escaping Pakistan. It started to work. His dialogue with the Department of Defense led quickly to the appointment of Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Lumpkin as a hostage recovery coordinator for the Pentagon. This step enabled the DoD to act decisively on the Bergdahl trade once the Taliban sought a deal. But the civilian hostages were forgotten during negotiations. I continued to work with Representative Hunter to try to get them home. He set up a meeting between my office and the FBI. Then the FBI formally complained to the Army that information I was sharing with them was classified. It was not. The Department of Defense Inspector General has since reviewed the information through my DoD IG complaint and confirmed it was not classified through a joint staff review. But still I'm under investigation. A terrible irony, a horrible irony, is that my security clearance was suspended on January 15th, the day after Warren Weinstein was killed. We were the only effort trying to free all the civilian hostages in Pakistan, and the FBI succeeded in ending our efforts the day after a U.S. drone strike killed Warren Weinstein. Am I right? Is the system broken? Layers upon layers of bureaucracy hid the extent of our failure from our leaders. I believe we all failed the Commander-in-Chief by not getting critical advice to him. I believe we all failed the Secretary of Defense, who likely never knew the extent of the interagency dysfunction. But now I'm considered a whistleblower for raising these issues. There's been no transparency to the Army's investigation of my protected communications with Representative Hunter. The Army would not even confirm why I was being investigated for the last 5 months until this week, and they only did that because of today's hearing. Danielle Bryan and Mandy Smithberger of the Project on Government Oversight have been a godsend, and Representatives Duncan Hunter and Jackie Spears stood up for me where nobody else in Congress did until today. I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to testify before you. The outpouring of support from fellow service members has been humbling. Worst for me is that the cadets I taught at West Point, now officers rising in the ranks, are reaching out to me to see if I'm okay. I fear for their safety when they go to war, and now they fear for my safety in Washington. Is that the enduring message we want to send? And we must not forget, Warren Weinstein is dead, while Colin Rutherford, Josh Boyle, Caitlin Coleman, and her child remain hostages. Who's fighting for them? Thank you.
I mean, as I'm hearing what was brought to the attention of superiors, I'm thinking you ought to be having medals pinned to your chest, not have retaliation inflicted upon you. So what I'd like to ask the whistleblowers here, I want you to very, hopefully as easily as possible, describe to me why. Why were you retaliated against? And I'd like to start with Lieutenant Colonel Amerine. And I appreciate you meeting with me in my office yesterday. I just want to, because you told me an awful lot yesterday, which I appreciate. I think I maybe have your why, but I want you to confirm this. You told me that in the course of your attempts to gain the freedom of these hostages in Afghanistan and Pakistan, you were made aware, it's your belief, that the government did pay a ransom and that ransom money was stolen. And secondly, that you believed you were pretty close to potentially having a deal where we would get 7 hostages in exchange for 1 Taliban leader, and instead we got 1 hostage in exchange for 5 Taliban leaders. Is that kind of in a nutshell, that information, is that why you've been retaliated against, or what is the reason? Yes, sir.
I think that there are layers of this, as I said, in terms of layers of the bureaucracy. On December 1st of 2014, Representative Hunter submitted a complaint to the IG alleging an illegal or questionable ransom possibly being paid for Sergeant Bergdahl. There was a good deal of evidence that it occurred and a lot of questions as to how it occurred. That complaint implicated both the DoD organization and the FBI. So part of what lit the fuse was the same folks in the FBI that were basically implicated in the DoD IG complaint of 1 December were the ones that later complained to the Army that I was sharing sensitive information with Representative Hunter. Another aspect of it on the FBI side was, I think, just the general frustration with Representative Hunter pushing them hard on civilian hostages and their awareness that I was speaking to Representative Hunter about all of this. I mean, he even set up a meeting between my office and the FBI to try to help them out with some of this. And after the meeting, they responded by contacting Caitlin Coleman's father and threatening him not to speak to Representative Hunter again or he would stop getting supported by the FBI. I mean, just an atrocious treatment of family. So the FBI complained to the Army, and for reasons to be seen, there was a bit of a debate within the Army whether I actually did anything wrong. And my understanding is one party, who I just don't want to be speculative, but there was a big debate within the Army over whether I did anything wrong, and that led to the investigation.
Can you tell me a little bit about Can you tell me a little bit about what deal you thought you had for the release of the hostages?
So my office worked options. We looked at a whole variety of options. One of the options that we developed was a, we called it, the 1 for 7 option. It entailed 6 hostages and a 7th person I'd just rather not discuss today. So the 6 hostages, there's actually 5 hostages and a prisoner of war. So Sergeant Bergdahl, Caitlin Coleman, the child she bore in captivity, Josh Boyle, and Colin Rutherford. When we saw that nobody else was trying to get them home, we were working every initiative possible. One was the 1 for 7, and in that we were looking at Haji Bashir Noorzai. He was described as the Pablo Escobar of Afghanistan, and we realized that he actually is just another warlord who was actually an ally of the Karzai regime. We lured him to the U.S. under a false promise of safe passage and basically unsealed an indictment and put him in jail for life. Some felt he was a wretched human being, and others felt he was wronged. As we looked at the options, we looked at 5 for 1, which we thought had died in 2012, as the worst option. And so for us it was, we aren't getting Bergdahl, let alone the other hostages, back for free. Every option was going to be painful. So the Noorzai option for us was one that was at least less painful. So we were able to reach out to the Noorzai tribe itself that we believe could free the hostages, and we made a lot of progress on it. I briefed it widely, but in the end, when the Taliban came to the table, the State Department basically said it must be the 5 for 1. That's the only viable option we have, and that's what we went with.
I can see how members of the government, if there was an option for 7 or 6 Americans for 1 Taliban, and the deal ended up being 5 Taliban for 1 American, they probably wouldn't want that too highly publicized. So, okay.